A camera is rolling.
Great, perfect.
Got it.
Yeah.
Paul Galanti, interview take 2, Mark.
So, there were a lot of factors that helped you endure. I want to speak a little bit more about the brotherhood. As you say, that's the cornerstone of the military, is that you are your brother's keeper, is that you have each other's backs. How did you, and from that first moment when Robbie Reisner got you the essential piece of information, and then you in turn did that for others like Mike Cronin, they're at risk to yourself, you would get that piece of information back. Speak to me about that community of brotherhood, that band of brotherhood that forms the military code.
Well, we're still pretty close today, and the situation over there changed a lot over the course of the war. When it first started, they didn't know what to do with Americans, and then they finally decided that that the Americans weren't paying any attention to them, so they started getting tough, and it's about the time I arrived, just in the nick of time, and then the torture started pretty heavily, and then it never slacked off, but it went up and down depending on how the war was going, how they perceived the war was going. If they thought it was going poorly, purges would pop up, and they'd torture for seemingly no reason at all, do stupid things to get answers to questions they already knew the answers to. And when it was really going good, all of a sudden the war was going good for them. They thought they'd be a little bit nicer to us. When Ho Chi Minh died, it was a major change in our treatment, and they were trying to improve. I think they got such a black eye from all the bad treatment when Hegdahl got out, especially, and the world found out exactly how we were being treated. There was a black eye for them, and so they were trying to make up for it, I think, and they didn't know what to do because we were basically being treated like their criminals were in their prison systems. And I remember one of the stupid things they did was they gave us these little we call them snake charmer baskets, and you'd put they give you a little pitcher held about a quart of water in it per day. It was boiled in the morning, and you kept it in the pitcher. And that's because Ho Chi Minh told them that you have to drink hot water because hot water is good for you and cold water is bad. Of course, because they didn't understand what germs were. So we had these little snake charmer baskets. And it turned out that's the best way to hide contraband that ever was invented. These little snake charmer baskets they gave us because they had a little lining in them for insulation, and those things held all kinds of notes guys were making and stuff. And so they were trying to be good to us, I think, for a while. And then it started to drag on and on and on and on, and it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And all of a sudden, we heard about the peace talks. The peace talks are going to happen, and then they have about a meeting every 2 months or 3 months or so. And then they just decided on the first meeting that what the shape of the table was going to be, and how big it was going to be, and that was a real drag part of this thing. But that's also when, unbeknownst to us or them, the Green Berets raided the camp west of Hanoi called Sante, and I had just been in that camp about a year, and it was the best thing that ever happened to us because the Vietnamese panicked, totally panicked, realizing that if Uncle Sam could get helicopters as an invasion force in 20 miles west of Hanoi, they could do it anywhere in the country. And next time, they didn't take anybody out this time because we weren't in that camp. But they realized if they got into the camp that they were in, they might take a few of those senior officers back with them to figure out what exactly is going on. Anyway, panic move, went into Hanoi. It's about 20 miles, I think I estimated about 20 miles. Broad daylight, and these buses were blindfolded, but that's all. We weren't shackled, and went in, thrown into back into the Wallow prison, but not the heartbreak part of it. They had all these big rooms that had been used for civilian prisoners before, and that's what they put us in. The room we were in, I was in room number 3. The way we numbered them, and initially it held 58 prisoners, and it was pretty tight. And they went down to 48 later, and that's what 48 is what we had all the way up until the war started up again. In that time that we were together, we had people in my room that could do anything. We had several master's degrees. We had people who had taught, people who had been squadron commanders, we had just a wealth of knowledge in there. And so we started building a bureaucracy, and I was sort of in charge of morale. And we used to have these skits and stuff we'd do every night. And for whatever reason, I discovered I had a hidden talent of writing singing jingles, singing commercials. And so every night for almost 2 years, I wrote a different singing commercial that we worked up, a little choir worked up in the harmony. And I've never heard of any of the other rooms doing that. Some of them had choirs where they sang hymns and stuff like that, but ours were little songs that, let me put it this way, I sing them sometimes if I'm speaking to the Rotary, or not the Rotary, I don't speak them to the Rotary, I sing them if I'm talking to the VFW or the American Legion, but if I'm speaking to a Sunday school class or a Rotary or something we're trying to make a good impression, I don't sing those commercials. Then, out of a clear blue sky, we got back on buses, all blindfolded and stuff, and drove. And many of us optimists figured we were going to get released, and we weren't. We were on our way up to the camp called Dog Patch, right at 5 kilometers from the Chinese border, and that's where I was for the rest of the war until right at the very end. And up there, it was miserable. They didn't have any electricity in the camp, no running water, and the good news was, if depending on your definition of good news, was when they butchered a water buffalo, you could hear it because it was right outside of our buildings. We initially, it ended up being called Dog Patch because it was so far in the boonies, but we initially wanted to call it Camp Cobra because as we came in the middle of the night, it was pitch black, no lights anywhere. They pushed us through the main opening, and we discovered that things cut into rooms inside it. And it was about 6 rooms, 5 or 6 rooms, and maybe two beds to a room, which were boards on the floor. And we knew it was filthy because you could smell it. And but we moved in the middle of the night. One of my cellmates, ironically, he's a music guy, but he's also had a BS in biology from Stanford. He loved snakes. He thought snakes were really great. And in the middle of the night, I heard this blood-curdling scream, and whap, 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 whap. And Bill Butler, the snake man, had something go slithering up the leg of his pajamas, and he grabbed it and beat it to death with his Ho Chi Minh sandal, tire tread. And the next morning, we wanted to wait for the sun to come up so we could see what this thing was. And the sun never came up, and we discovered that there was only one brick out of the entire wall all the way around that building. It was on the far side. And when the sun came up, you could see a little bit of light over there, but that was the only light in this little bungalow. He held this thing up to the light, and it was a 6-foot-long cobra. And so we had a little trouble getting to sleep for a few nights after that. But anyway, I spent the rest of the war there. I had one interrogation. I had had interrogation for years, and had one interrogation when the camp commander called me into a cell or interrogation room, and he said, sucking air through his teeth, "According to you, what are your wife's activities?" And I said, "Well, how do I know? I don't get any mail." He said, "Maybe that is why you get no mail." So I wasn't sure what Phyllis was doing, but whatever she was doing, he didn't like it, so therefore I did. And that was about it.
Let's, on the topic of Phyllis, let's talk about one of the critical things the military is looking at in veterans today, particularly veterans who have sustained injuries, is how can we best greet and support the returning warriors? And you went through the shock of imprisonment. You went through the radical change, as you said. You're coming down, and it was the first time you smelled Vietnam. You actually smelled the world as it was on the ground. In terms of your return, you had the code of return with honor. And then there was additionally the code of returning. What was it going to be to return? Your wife, Phyllis, was a huge force in bringing into the forefront of the country's consciousness the plight of the POWs. She was an indefatigable workforce. Tell me about what your return was like. Were there things that reached out to you and embraced you and brought you back in that we can learn from in terms of future warriors returning from seats of conflict or hurt? And also, were there things that you wished people had understood? They needed things from you that perhaps they needed for themselves, but they didn't understand what you needed and your fellow POWs needed.
Well, I'm just speaking for me, but in Portsmouth Naval Hospital, which is where I was, so several of the senior officers, the East Coast types, I've been on the West Coast, but Phyllis had settled in Richmond. First of all, I got off the airplane. We're flying. For whatever reason, I'm not sure how it happened, but I ended up on the first airplane getting back to the States. One of the reasons, I think, was I was the third airplane out of Hanoi. They had that one hospital. They brought every flight surgeon in from all services to that hospital to process us all. And things are going swimmingly. But I was the third airplane out, and so we got there and we're getting on the bus. We had to get married up with our escort officer, and everybody had one except me. And I said, "Where's my escort officer? I don't have one." And after about 10 minutes, this Navy guy, Lieutenant Commander Al Santoro, comes running up. "Okay, we can go now." He says, "Where the hell you been?" He said, "Well, I figured this base is so screwed up, which is true, they don't know which side is up. So I just went over to operations and said, you're number one on the first flight going back to the U.S. So now we got to get you through the hospital." And so he signed me up to be on the first airplane out. And then we went back to the hospital. Of course, the other guys, the first two airplanes had been there all day. And we were the third airplane just getting there, and we got to go through all these stations and stuff and get seen by a doctor and get something to eat, hopefully. Well, I didn't do anything. He just ran right to the front of every line. And he went up and said, "Excuse me, he's on the first airplane to going back to the States. Would you mind if he goes first?" And so I went first. I went bing, 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 bing. I went through all these places in about an hour. And so I got everything done. And I got, my teeth cleaned, and I got glasses ordered and haircut, and I was all finished. The other guys are still waiting in lines at all these clinics, and I went over to get something to eat. And this little Hawaiian Air Force captain, is a dietitian, is standing there and said, "All right, there's the food." I said, "You have to have a bland diet. Your system's not ready for real food yet." And, and I looked at her and jumped on my hands and did 25 vertical push-ups and walked around the room. I went up and said, "If you can do that, I'll eat a bland diet. If you can't eat that, I'm going to eat steak chops." She got her thing out, gave me a piece of paper. And my first meal back was a 16-ounce steak and half a gallon of ice cream. And that's all I had. And the only two things I craved the whole time I was in Hanoi. Anyway, got on the airplane, first one, away we go. Jeremiah Denton was a senior guy all the way back. And he was the first one off the first airplane, made that great speech that they're making the plebes memorize at Navy now. And then we went from the Philippines to Hawaii, and he had to get off. He had to make another speech there. And we went to San Francisco, then St. Louis, and we're finally in Norfolk. As we're taxiing in, the only three getting off there are Jim Mulligan, Jerry Denton, and me. And so we're taxiing in, and Dad comes up and says, "Paul, you're the junior guy on this flight. I've been doing this everywhere. I can't think of anything else to say. You get out and say something." Never done that before. The ramp comes down and walk out, and there's all these lights out there and hundreds of people at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I couldn't think of anything to say, so I said, "Thank you all for coming out. It's too close to stand here, so let's wrap this thing up." Introduced myself and said, "I'm looking over there, and I see my parents, and I see my wife of 8 years, but only 2 years in reality. So I'm going to just recite to her a little poem I sent her on my first midshipman cruise back in 1959. And I read that little poem, and it went, "Lonely the days and nights, my love, that we have been apart. It seems almost forever since I held you to my heart. The moments are as restless as the waves that move the sea, but every second means a step nearer, my love, to thee." And the crowd went bonkers, and everybody's crying, and including me. And then somebody came up to me. I didn't understand the terminology. They said, "Boy, talking like that, you might get lucky tonight." I said, "Right." But anyway, but the rest of the time, the hospital was incredible. Admiral Aronson was the hospital commander. Later became Surgeon General of the Navy, and he ran that place like a high-quality hotel. We each had actually 2 rooms, and one room was the wives could stay there, just a living room, a bedroom, and then the bathroom between them, and then the other one was set up like a big lounge. It had a television set and everything else. And I don't think any of the other hospitals were set up like that, but it certainly made it a lot easier.
What was it like? You had been gone for 7 years. When you turned on the television, when you looked around that tarmac and styles had changed, tell me a little bit about that change.
Oh, styles didn't change because it was a military base. And these guys are all looked almost the same, so they had mustaches, and thanks to Zumwalt, they had mustaches and a lot of facial hair. But the rest of it, the change wasn't that bad. I kept thinking, it was a lot harder adapting going the other direction than it was coming back here. I had to get used to the fact that I was barely at 03 when I got shot down. And now all of a sudden I'm a senior lieutenant commander. And I thought, holy shit, that's a long time. I kept thinking Alvarez went from a JG to a commander while he was in prison. And it was really a long time, but we had catching up to do. We didn't have time to worry about that. The hardest thing for me coming back, literally, was learn how to drive again, because I hadn't walked faster than, or moved faster than about 3 minutes, 3 miles an hour for the last 10 years. Excuse me. I had to get used to a lot of things. worst of which was driving, and I kept bumping into the curb. I kept swinging wide. I just wasn't used to motion. After the airplane coming back, there wasn't any motion. You take off and you're just in this big airplane. But in a car, you see it all the time. And so it was, the state police brought some troopers down and were giving us driving lessons, and we acquired our driver's license. And that was good, but that was the hardest thing for me, was learning how to drive again. In fact, in August, when I was there from February until, I guess, about end of July or early August. They released us back to got a thumbs up for medical, and went back to flight training. And flight training was no problem at all. I went to flight training at Oceana. I had one dual flight with an instructor, and then they just gave me an airplane, a credit card, and said, go ahead and start turning laps. Here's the syllabus. Go put yourself through it. And that was it. I ran zipping around the country and got 75 hours in about 10 days. And I was ready to go back to action.
And when did you become aware of the role that Phyllis had played in championing you and the other POWs?
That interrogation I had in Hanoi, I wasn't sure exactly what she was doing, but the camp commander didn't like it, so I did. And that's what she was doing. She had, a lot of the wives were active in the organization, but Phyllis got very close to Sybil Stockdale. And Sybil's out in San Diego with 4 little boys, and we didn't have any kids. And she was right there in Richmond's, a whole lot closer to where the Puzzle Palace up in D.C. And so Sybil said, Phyllis, would you mind? So Phyllis went to the regular meetings. They had about an annual meeting or a couple of meetings a year. But she was on call anytime. They had a league office up in Washington itself, and she used to hang out there sometimes. But she was a POW wife and had been there, and so Sybil called her and said, "Would you mind taking this thing over? I just can't do it." So Phyllis became chairman of the National League of Families. And by the way, she does not want to slip. She preferred the title chairman. And she resigned when I got on the list, or she saw the list, and I was on it. That for her was the toughest part, because the Vietnamese, the cruelest thing they did the entire time was not release a list. They didn't release a list of those who survived and were still alive, and those who died. And so there were. It was a bittersweet moment when there were a lot of people who were expecting to have a loved one come back, and nothing, no word. The Vietnamese didn't say whether they died or whatever. They were supposed to have done that. There were several they didn't do that with. But there were several who came back who their loved ones, their wife or their parents, thought they were dead because they were listed as KIA by the Navy, and it had never changed the whole time they were in prison.
Even when Hagdell came back and recited the names.
Well, that list he had was accurate. I mean, memorized it exactly as he got it, but there were a lot of errors on it. And I know one fella I threw into the list was Joe Creech, and but there wasn't a Joe Creech, but there was a Joe Crecca, and if you spell Crecca, C-R-E-C-C-A, could also be C-R-E-E-C-H. It sounds through the wall when you're passing names like that. Several of them got garbled, and there are others. If one of those garbled names was somewhat close to somebody who was an MIA, you don't know what happened to him. So it was confused for a little while, but it didn't take them too long to get that thing all straightened out. And we found out that our foreign POWs were not released with us. And so we insisted on that, and that's how Dot, the South Vietnamese pilot, he came out. He's part of our group now. He's an American citizen. He's part of our group. The two Thais, one of them died fairly quickly, and the other made full colonel in the Thai Air Force, and he just died. But anyway, but they were with us too. So
And what was as you were enduring, and you and your fellow POWs were enduring the hardships in the Hanoi Hilton, you knew that your wife was championing you and worried about you. What was that like for you? And was it something that you shared through the wall with other men, that you all spoke about the things you missed, that you longed for, and
yeah, oh yeah, we did that, and their guys had interest in all kinds of things, and people acquired new interests from living with those folks. When we came home, the wives had been told we're probably going to be nuts. This is from a psychiatrist somewhere, had met the National League of Families, and said, don't expect big things. These guys have been in for a long time. And they really had a hard time believing that we were so happy, that we were just sort of normal. We weren't really wacky. And some guys had some problems, but for the most part, we came out of it pretty well. And I attribute that to the fact that for each other we were hanging in there. So we never really got, society wasn't there, but we were. When we had our own little society, and the best attended meetings I go to of anything, I go to a lot of them, different things, are POW reunions. And initially almost everybody went to all of them, and then that started figuring out after a while, and we started losing guys. But it was, I think everybody, the medical community in particular, was surprised how well we did. And all the services started individual programs to run by the chief of medicine. And the one in Pensacola was done at the Naval Aerospace Medical Institute. And that's still, Dr. Bob Mitchell, who's one of the finest human beings I've ever known, he said, we could probably work these guys into our 1,000 aviator program using the same parameters and get a control group out of similar pilots or into flight officers or Marine grunts or whoever. And we could do it the same way we did the 1,000 aviator program. These guys come in every year or as often as they can, get a full Mayo Clinic type physical, and then bring the control group in once every 3 years. Then we compare them after a period of time. Once we have enough data to study, we'll compare them and see, what the differences are and everything. Well, out of that, we got spoiled like little pampered pets, but it was really good because we found out that we didn't do as bad as everybody thought we were going to do. And a lot of it, we took those mental tests and stuff right after we got home, these memory tests. Well, that's all we'd been doing for 5, 6, 7 years, and memorizing things. And we maxed out all the mental tests much better than the control group. And the only thing the control group, we were worse than the control group in was orthopedic injuries, which is what you'd expect from a population made up of combat ejections.
Yes, yes. Wow. And how much of that do you attribute to leadership of men like Jeremiah Denton, of CAG, Stockdale?
All of it. All of it.
Speak to me about their leadership.
All of it. See, these guys are like gods to us. I never met CAG in prison, but I knew everything about him. The guys in his squadron that were there in his air group just praised him to the moon. And same thing with Denton. And And of course, Denton was special attention because he was an A6 guy, and A6 was top secret then. When the A6 went into combat for the first time, they had 135 tech reps on the ship with them, just keeping that airplane in the air. And but anyway, that was all that. Robbie Reisner, for a long time, every time I meet the guy, my eyes would start watering. And just a great guy. And Ross Perot, when he retired from the Air Force, Ross Perot paid for a big party for him out in Las Vegas. And that's still one of the most meaningful things I've ever gone to, because a lot of the senior officers were there. Of course, I knew who they all were, but I hadn't met many of them, because we didn't, unless you were in a cell with them or whatever, you didn't meet them. They just knew who they were. And I got to tell each one of them, Stockdale, Denton, of course, Robbie, just how much they meant, with their few minutes or their little lesson they held up meant to hold us together. And I kept thinking, what the hell do those guys have to lean on? They're the ones that are holding up as example for us. But what do they have to lean on? It's just them, each other. I think, that's just, they're really strong people. And I was raised an Army brat, and I knew what the military was. I went to what I thought was the best high school military prep school in the country, and then the Naval Academy. And but somehow or other, they never hit all those little finite things. There are hints of it. I know what the basis was, where it came from. The reason we got so close when the chips were really down, because it was Plebeier, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, Golf, and Hotel. It was all that military stuff we'd had wherever, whether it was in boot camp or flight training or whatever. That was the glue that held us together.
Beautiful, beautiful, Paul. So on that note, a couple of things. If you could go back in time and speak to yourself as a young midshipman,
Right?
and having learned what you've learned through your life experience, what are some of the key things you would try to tell yourself?
Basically, what I said here today, we were, particularly after Valley Forge military at my high school, I was going to go wild and went over to Germany for a year, going to college, and chasing girls all over the place and just having really a great time. And I think in the back of my mind was the fact that there's going to be some rain falling into this life at some point. And I think I was prepared for it, but I didn't prepare for it. I think I got prepared by this military school I went to, by the Naval Academy, by the fact that if you remember when you're a little kid and they're picking people to play ball and you're the last guy, they ran out of bat before they got to you and you're watching them. That's sort of the way I didn't want to be that guy. And so whatever ridiculous things these young post-adolescents wanted to do, I wanted to be right smack in the middle of it. So I had a lot of fun from the time I finished high school until I got shot down, including a lot of fun at the Naval Academy, a lot more than I should have been. But it was still, the guys I was having fun with were going through the same thing. And I think that's all part of that bonding process. I don't remember anybody getting on a high horse and preaching about anything. And thou shalt do this, thou shalt do that. We just knew it. We just knew what we were supposed to do, and we knew what we weren't supposed to do. And some of the stuff we weren't supposed to do, we wanted to do anyway, and we did. And some of the stuff we weren't supposed to do, we did anyway and regretted it.
So it's fair to say that if you were going to speak to yourself as a young midshipman or a present-day young midshipman, one of the lessons I hear you saying is one of the most important things you'll ever have is each other. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I will. But they probably already know that, but they couldn't articulate it. I could articulate it after having been in Hanoi and thought about it for a while. But there are, I gotta be careful how I say this, 'cause I don't want it to come out wrong. It's not taught anywhere now. I hate it because they don't use plurals, right? Everybody get there, but everything, so you can't tell it's boy, girl, you don't want to mess that up. What they have to realize is, I thought about this before. These are the best of times, and these are the worst of times. They really are. But you got to think about it. You got to figure out what you're doing, what makes it the best of times, and what's screwing that up, and quit doing the stuff that screws it up, and do the best of times. We had a lot of time to think about that in Hanoi, that we weren't encumbered with happy hours and stuff that's killing thousands of brain cells with alcohol, and so. But I think I had a little bit of that before. I was pretty gung-ho before. I wanted to make my squadron the best squadron ever. And the whole time I was in, I mean, every time we get more than 2 people, it was a competition. And that's really what we're based on. It's fun competition because you don't want to be the guy that gets left behind.
Beautiful, beautiful. Do you remember an incident at I believe it was in the Hanoi Hilton, perhaps you were there, someone began to sing God Bless America. Can you tell me that story?
Yeah, that was, what was the occasion? I think it's when we first went in. We first went in the big cells. It was right around Christmas of 1970, I think, right after the Sante raid. And we started singing. There was, the senior officer room, the one that had all the main corpus of Alcatraz, and these are all senior officers and sort of Bud Day, Mike Christian. I'm gonna make sure I get this right. Somebody had made a little American flag and put it inside his pajamas, and so we decided to have a little patriotic thing, and they popped it open, and everybody stood up and started reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. And of course, that makes a lot of noise when you have 60 guys in a room. And then they started singing, and the guards went bonkers. I'm sure the camp authorities turned them loose. They came in like a riot. They had their helmets on and armed rifles, and they came in there. They're pulling people out, beating them, making them shut up, and so they. It's a slightly different story. Anyway, Mike Christian was a young Navy BN, and he had, when he moved into that room, he made the flag, and got different pieces of thread he found here and there, and using bamboo for needles, made this little American flag. And that's what we were pledging allegiance to. And when the guards came in and to stop this thing, they figured this is an insurrection. They found out this flag was sewed in his pajamas. They hauled him outside, beat the living daylights out of him, just outside the window. We could hear it all through these open windows. And then that's when Bud Day jumped up on the bed and started singing God Bless America, or the Star Spangled Banner, and then ran around room to room to room to room, and it got louder and louder and louder. And the camp, they had the huge inspection. They ripped everybody's clothes apart looking for flags and all kinds of contraband things. and it got really rough. But that is rough. They kept taking senior officers. They try and get us to stop, and the senior officer get up there and say, no, you're not doing that. So they get the senior officer to haul him out, another senior officer. Pretty soon all these rooms they're losing all their senior officers, but the next senior guy gets up. We knew the chain of command all the way through. The next senior guy get up there and say, okay, let's press on. We're going to keep doing this. And finally, the authorities gave up. They just said, screw it, we can't do anything.
And were you there that night singing?
Oh yeah. I was I was diagonally across the camp from where they were.
Would you mind, sir, singing a little bit of that from memory?
Of what
God Bless America, or?
I thought you wanted to sing one of my commercials.
I do, later.
Okay. Okay. God, I can't sing. I can't sing. I don't want to sing serious stuff. Part of the reason I sing funny songs is because I have a funny voice. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairie, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home. It sounds awful. I know exactly where it was. If I had an instrument, I can play them, but I can't sing them. Because, remember Jimmy Durante? I got a million of them. You know, that's the kind of voice I have.
I loved that rendition. That was my favorite rendition of God Bless America I've ever heard.
Oh, shit.
No, seriously. Ken, you got that, right? Because
Yep.
he leaned forward, so
Yeah.
I went out of focus.
What, it's just us boys in here?
No, Carrie's over there. And
Where's Carrie?
she's...
Oh, it's okay.
What did you think of that, Carrie?
I thought it was beautiful.
I thought it was beautiful too. Do you mind, I know this is a lot to ask of you, but would you mind singing it again? But because you leaned forward, it went away from the mic, and I thought it was so fantastic that if you could not lean forward, it would be a perfect audio for us.
Yeah, let me clear my throat. One of the curses of my life is I'm the only Italian in the whole world who can't sing. God bless America, land. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairie, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home. Ba-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Let me ask you, sir, what does freedom mean to you?
I'm tempted to say freedom is pure freedom, but if you do what most people think of with pure freedom, it's not freedom, it's license. We have laws and rules and whatever set up by typically bright minds that we have to obey, but we're the only country that can do that and have parameters to do anything we want to do in this side as long as we stay in those parameters. There are almost every other country that, even the ones that purport to be free, can't do that. They can try, they say they do, but they're not really free to do everything because somebody's looking over their shoulder, somebody's turning them in. I watched that in Hanoi. I watched our captors, they didn't know we were watching them, but in a couple places we were in schoolyards, and you could watch them. They were afraid of the guy who was obviously in charge. And I don't personally know any American is afraid of anybody who's in charge. And that's freedom. We just don't have it. But anywhere else you go, there people are scared of their own shadows because they're afraid they might offend somebody. And we don't have that here.
Beautiful. And, sir, if you can, what is a hero in your estimation? You've witnessed many heroes.
My plebe, the Galanti trained plebe, Charlie Plum, his first book was called I'm No Hero. And the I is not capitalized. It's small I, capital, or comma, small I, apostrophe, M, no hero, all lowercase. And that's really what it is. That's what we are. There's a different thing going on now in the country where they have heroes, and it's somebody that has sold a million albums, a million records, a million songs on an album, or they're movie stars or whatever. Those aren't heroes. Heroes are the guy that stood there in Hanoi when John Frederick we think he was dying, and they wouldn't give him any attention, and we yelled and screamed until he got some attention. They came and got him, and the doctor came in to see him. Doing that, knowing you can probably get the daylights beat out of you for doing it, that's being a hero. You can, a guy throws a beautiful 70, oh God, I wish I could do that, a beautiful pass down there, and somebody grabs it and runs the whole length and makes a big touchdown. Everybody's cheering and yelling. Big football hero. That's not exactly what it is. Somebody that does something because it's the right thing to do. He knows it's the right thing to do, even though he may have some pretty bad consequences from it.
That's fantastic. Can you speak a little bit about how leadership helped you, all of you, recover from failure? What you felt was failure.
Well, I took just one night riding in a Jeep, handcuffed to Robbie Reisner, to just tell me I did nothing changed except my definition. A definition changed of what was bad and what was good. And I thought I was a failure. I thought that I was the only guy, the only one who caved in. All the rest of these guys are in here somewhere. It never happened to them, it was just me. And that's what made me suddenly realize that, wait, that wasn't so bad after all. And I still felt bad. And I confess I fought a lot harder next time they tried to do that. But it's just having somebody else say, that was kind of a flawed concept anyway. It's sort of the charge of the light brigade type thing, which is what the code of conduct was. The charge of the light brigade was okay, but everybody died. So if that's what it's supposed to be, fine. Someone, Stockdale, I don't know who came up with this thing, with the tolerate torture to the point of permanent, only to the point of permanent disability. That one thing there let me know about that, saved my life, because I thought I'd been ordered with a code of conduct the way they were doing to me over there. I'd been ordered to die and I couldn't handle it.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful, Paul. It's so. To speak to part of the audience for your words are young leaders in training to be leaders of tomorrow, to be exos of battleships of, so, and one of the difficult things for leaders to understand sometimes when they're trying to get performance from their subordinates is what Robbie Reisner gave you, which is also understanding what their limitations are and being proud of their ability to continue to attempt in spite of those limitations. Can you speak about that aspect of leadership?
I'm not sure if that's leadership or followership. It's just that when Robbie Reiser told me that, it's just, it wasn't, I felt good for me, anything I did. It's just I didn't want to let that man down, ever. And then the same thing with other senior officers at the camp. Sometimes I didn't like them, but they were the senior guy, and there's nobody in any room I was ever in. The Vietnamese never knew that we didn't think our senior officers walked on water. And I think it might be helpful, and I don't know if you can teach this the right way, but I learned it from me just watching Robbie with this thing. He didn't have to do that. He got banged on the head about 50 times for talking to me, taking a chance and letting it hang out for that. But you have to let him know that you're always on parade. It may not be a parade field. It may not be tucked in, flying into the break, looking like that. But every place you go, if you're a naval officer, if you're a Marine, or if you're Air Force, Army, or whatever, you're on parade. Everybody's looking at you. You can't get away from it. And it suddenly occurred to me it wasn't little hotshot Galanti stuck in there, and the guy's beating the living daylights out of him, and he signed a statement saying I'll give lenient or acknowledging lenient, humane treatment. I think that's something that could be laid out there, saying you're always on parade, whether anybody can see you or not. Just assume that there's you're going down Warden Field, passing in review, and everybody's looking at you because they are. And if it's one guy or whoever it is, you got to live up to the standards of that thing. If you got to march, you got to march the right way. You got to do whatever you can do, so you don't let the other folks in the unit down or whatever. Anyway, I'm getting all wrapped up in rhetoric now. My brain is going to sleep. But anyway, I think it's one. You know it if you see it.
Yes.
And the way it's taught is you have to get a bunch of guys like that. And the trouble is when you get folks that don't know what they're doing coming in and setting the wrong standards or dropping the standards because they think it's too hard. If we're being too hard on these folks, it's the exact wrong thing to do. And because everybody knows exactly what's happening.
You've been incredible, and I'm going to finish it up here because I know it's taxing. But there's one famous story told of you. You were being used for a propaganda film, and you showed a moment of resistance that grew on in infamy. Can you tell me that story?
Well, that was the clean and neat room. That was they moved us. Charlie Green and Dave Gray and I were cellmates for quite a while, and they put us in this. It was an old French film studio. They had big canisters of 30. It was a sloppy, filthy mess. But they wanted us to clean it up, so we're cleaning it up, and then the camp commander. Also, we couldn't understand what they're saying. We could tell whenever they're calling higher headquarters because they usually ran into the house, and it's a little hand crank phone, and they'd crank it, and they yell back and forth at each other, and then they didn't know we could see them out of our little window, and so the guy, it was I think Louis the Snake, he was obviously second generation communist, He comes in. He said, "We have some visitors coming to Vietnam." Okay. They want to speak to some American prisoners. You must speak to them. You want me to speak to some of them? Great. I'll tell them about all the torture and bad treatment. Oh. And he went running out of the room and went running down, went over to that phone. And then he comes back and he says, "I don't think they will talk to you. If they don't talk to you, you don't talk to them. So, okay. But you must have good attitude. You must have good attitude in your room." Okay. And so we're in the room, and here comes this crew. They're speaking German, and I went to school in Germany for a year. I knew enough. I could understand them when they were talking, and the guy comes walking in, and he just said something. I just sat in the bed, staring right at the camera's over there, staring right at the camera, and they're starting to get uncomfortable. And they had a guy with these big lights, a big bar of lights, and he was holding that. And they're taking like movies. I just kept looking. And he kept saying, "You must have, the camp commander's back there, and he's very quiet." And I wouldn't smile. And the other two guys in the room, one of them, they made them turn their backs because I was a known POW. They knew, number one, that I'd talked to the other airplanes when I was on the ground. I had my little survival radio, and I'd also been interviewed by this French woman communist, and so they said, "You must sit here. You must behave. You must have good attitude. Show good attitude." So I just sat on they're just boards. It's 2 sawhorses and some boards. That was my bed. It's actually the best bed I had in Hanoi. Boards are much softer than concrete, and so I'm sitting on the edge of this thing, like this, and they gave me a newspaper. I was supposed to be reading it. And I said, "I don't want this." And then I said, catcher, just like Joe Garagiola. I'm going to sit here and so I just sat there and just slipped my middle fingers down in between my legs, and
Hands, Ken, hands.
I was trying to figure out cook up something. I said, "Oh, my fingers are very stiff today," or something. And they never said anything. They went out. On the way out, as they're leaving, I said, "Wiedersehen, Schleichkopf," and the light guy turned around and looked, and I figured that was probably going to do it. And they went out, and I never heard anything about it again until that conversation just before we came home up at Dog Patch, when the guy was talking to me. He says, "You must have good. How was your health? How was your?" And I said, "Oh, the health's lousy, and the food's lousy, and according to you, what are your wife's activities?" I said, "Well, how do I know? I don't get any mail." I said, "Oh, maybe that's why you get no mail." And then he said, "Besides, you show bad attitude with fingers." I thought, that son of a bitch. He never said, I didn't want to bring a subject up and talk about it, but I think that's what he was talking about.
Beautiful. Can we get a signal on that, Kent? Just what I'm going to have you do, Paul, so that we can see that is just put your hands forward, and Kent's going to focus just on your hands so that we can get that.
Okay. Actually, it's same color trousers. Okay. Well, actually, I think I was up over the edge.
What was that?
Just back, just
I'll tilt down.
No, it's the cable. You're good, you're good.
okay.
You're good. I'm just
All
gonna move
right,
it.
tilt down too, Kent.
I'm just gonna move that cable.
Okay.
Alright, thank you.
I know you can see it from that angle.
Yes, sir, perfect.
And then bring your fingers in, and then extend them when I say action, okay? So tuck your fingers in. Now ready, and action. Nice. Perfect. All right, I'm gonna reframe. And so Paul, I'm complete with my questions, but I wanted to make sure that I covered everything that you would like. Is there anything that you would have wanted to add to this, or thoughts you have, or anything else that I might not have thought to ask?
Yeah, well, the sense of humor comes into, and it's our skits and stuff. We didn't have any problems in our cell. There, other people had fights and stuff. I don't remember.
Probably on your microphone, Patrick.
Yeah, I'm so just sorry, Paul, if you could sit back, cause the audio is there we go.
Those skits and stuff we did, and the classes we had in my room.
Sorry. Just lost the light. I apologize, Paul. Just lost the background light.
Oh,
Yeah, the power that the sense of humor had in confounding the Vietnamese audition, it was huge. Ken's got the light back up, so we'll be able to continue to go.
My apologies.
that's right.
Speak on, sir. Oops, it just went out again, Ken. You know what, Ken, let's just go with it. It's moody, it's for this bit, it'll be fine. Okay. Thank you. You were gonna say about a sense of humor and about things that you had together in
Oh yeah. When I was in solitary, I used to think of this stuff all the time, and I try to remember the names and words of songs. All the way back to World War II. I've always liked music. I just couldn't do it myself. It made me mad. And I could play instruments. I'd pick them up and start playing them, but I could never sing. So I sat there walking back and forth in my cell, humming these things. Then I started getting thinking about it. I could speak French and German, sort of, and Spanish. I was learning that, and so I started writing these little jingles in my mind. And we got together in our music class. We had our little choir, and so I get to every single night for almost 2 years. I wrote a different singing commercial for every.
Could you sing a couple of those?
Some of them are really awful. I'm not sure I want to get them on tape, but they're all. The one when I do it in high schools and stuff, I can sing this one because it's not gross. And the ones that are really gross, most of them are in another language. But my favorite one was one of the first ones I did, and remember the way Cisco Kid started off. Cisco and Pancho are galloping down the highway. Dun, dun, dun. Hey, Cisco. Hey, Pancho. Hey, Cisco. We got to get out of here. Man, these horses, they ain't fast enough. Hey, Cisco, look up. There's an hombre with a Ferrari. Cisco, take his Ferrari. So I go up. Hombre, stick him up. Hombre sticks him up. And then in 4-part harmony, the sheriff, Cisco, Pancho, and the guy with the Ferrari sing, the engine is a V12. The car, she goes so fast. When you drive Ferrari, I think you don't get past. So why not drive Ferrari? 10 grand is all you pay. Yes, 1965. Drive a new Ferrari and drive your cares away. Ferrari, Ferrari, Ferrari's good enough for me. Ferrari, Ferrari, faster than my A4C. C. And then the worst car I ever owned was a Renault Dauphine. And so, since I spoke a little bit of French, I'm going to make up a song for Renault Dauphine, a little commercial. This is to the tune of Merry Oldsmobile. En français. Si vous cherchez un auto fine, puis regardez Renault Dauphine, c'est un auto magnifique. S'il ne vous donne pas la bique, that's bad. Vous obtiendrez 50 000 par gallon, même qu'il est un grand cochon. Vous aurez la style qu'en traversant la ville dans votre fine Renault Dauphine, which means si vous cherchez un automobile, if you're looking for a fine car, puis regardez Renault Dauphine and look at the Renault Dauphine. C'est un auto magnifique. It's a beautiful car, even though it doesn't get you sexually excited. Vous obtiendrez 50 000 par gallon. You get 50 miles per gallon. Même qu'il est un grand cochon, even though it's a grand pig, big pig. Vous aurez la style qu'en traversant la ville dans votre fine Renault. You have much style crossing town in your fine Renault Dauphine. And then another one in French that I liked. I got one in German that's I think is funny. So Phyllis never did, but the my other French one is the Moulin Rouge. You know, the can da 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 da. This is Moulin Rouge. Quel est le club le plus fameux dans notre grande cité? Moulinrouge, Moulin Rouge, Moulin Rouge. Puis amis tendant nos battes haute. Friends, hold your balls high. Mes amis, venez ici, plaisir vous trouverez. Moulinrouge, Moulin Rouge, aka Mickey Mouse. And then I wrote a really nasty one in Russian, but I can't remember it. It's about a German love song. You know, American and French and love songs are just little thing and whatever. And the Germans actually have a few love songs. One is the tune goes, Ich liebe dich, Schatz, ich liebe dich, Schatz, ich da 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 da. That's not the way Germans are. And you get Germans in romantic scenes that go something like this. Ich hasse dich, Schatz, ich wünsche, dass du warst tot. I hate you, dear, I wish you were dead. Öffnest das Fenster auf dein Unterseeboot. Open the window in your submarine. Und was das Wasser macht deine Wohnung voll. And when the water fills up your living space, so dann trinkst du zu mir und mein Scher liebevoll. And drink to me and my happy life. A little German love song.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was amazing. Just really, truly a treat. So that's good for us. We're going to give you now a break. We're just, I think, going to catch a little bit of B-roll of you down with the
case with Phyllis's dress.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, Carrie, can you help on uncut camera?